Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I color white images with my alcohol markers. Now also keep in mind, there are many other ways that you can do this. I just want to share with you how I approach white images. The supplies that I'm going to be using today is the Wintertime Critters. It is a stamp and also has a coordinating die set for this. It has some adorable images on here. And then I'm also going to use the Scattered Snowflakes stencil. So I chose the image that has this polar bear giving a penguin a hug. So there's going to be two different ways I'm actually going to color in some white areas. I have Express It blending cardstock placed in my Misti tool. I did rub my hand over the image to condition it so that it will take ink better. And then I'm stamping that down in the Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. Any Copic friendly or alcohol friendly ink will work for this. I'm going to stamp it twice since it is a brand new stamp and I want to make sure I have some really crisp black lines. So this first part of coloring I left in real time, and the first thing I need to decide is what shade do I want to make my polar bear? I'm going to go for some warm grays. I've seen a lot of people color polar bears in blues, but I decided I wanted to give it more of a warmer tone. And when I was choosing my Copic markers for this, I went every other one. So here I have W4, I skipped W3, went to W2, skipped W1, and went to W0. So I'm going to start by adding some shading with my darkest color, which is the W4. I had to pick a side for my shading to go. So when I look at this, I'm going to picture it as my light source or the light coming from the left-hand side. So the brightest areas are going to be on the face. Then I just went through and pictured where any shadows would be. You can also Google pictures of polar bears to get a reference to give you an idea of where that would be, but I will go through and add those shadows. I'm also going to add one right around where the penguin is giving a hug, because to me, where the penguin is pressed up against the penguin or against the polar bear, there would be a little bit of a darker area there. There are also different ways to do this. I've seen a lot of people add flicks with their brush to create textures with the fur and things like that. I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to keep this very simple and just add that line of color. Now I'm going to come in with W2 and I'm going to go over that previous color and extend it out just a little bit. Whenever I'm coloring white images, I am going to leave the majority of the image white. You don't have to. Like I said, there's many different ways to approach this. This is just how I approach these images. So I will continue to just draw out that W2 a little bit, and I'm going to end with W0. A lot of times I also like to pick out a 1 or a 0 in that color selection. That's going to have more of the colorless blender in the marker, so it's not going to be as saturated with the color, and it's easier to have it fade off into white when you're ending with a 1 or a 0 or even a double 0. Another thing to keep in mind is that it may look a little funny to you. You may look at it and just think this doesn't look right, but give it time. A lot of times if we are up close, which we are when we're coloring, when we're really up close, we're seeing every little detail. But when somebody is looking at this from just a few feet away in their hand, or even after the ink has dried, it does kind of soak into the cardstock a little bit better and will smooth out. Now, I am using the Express It cardstock. I've kind of been using this a little more frequently because the ink tends to stay wet a little bit longer on the cardstock. It doesn't sink in as much as it would if I was using the 80-pound Nina Solar White, which I have used in the past and I still do, but every now and then I like to dig out my Express It so that I have a little bit more time to blend my colors. I used to think coloring images that were white or even as snow, anything with light colors like that, I used to think were some of the hardest images to color, but now I find them the easiest, and I think one of the reasons for that is because it does have such a limited color selection. You could do this in a 2-marker blend. I've always gotten in the habit of using 3. It was kind of how I learned to use Copic markers, and it's just something that always stuck. Now my polar bear is finished and I'm going to move on to the penguin. I did speed up the rest of this video. For the penguin, I have B97, B95, and B93. Again, you can see where I skipped some colors, and I just find it easier to create contrast without making it too hard to blend my colors. For the penguin's face, I took a W2 and just added a line of it. I did not even draw that out with a W0. I just left that little bit of a shadow area. I filled in the ear on the polar bear and the nose with a light pink and an orange. And now this is another way that you can color in a white image. So I have that block of ice there that I used BG11 and BG10. Again, I added a shadow area with the darkest color and just blended that out with the BG10. I did not fill in the entire piece of ice. I left a lot of that white. Finished off the scarf with some pink and a red marker. And now that my image is colored, I'm going to use the coordinating die to trim that out. I also die cut out another piece that I'm going to add some tape runner to, and then I'm going to layer my colored image on top of that to give it a little bit stability because It Cardstock is not super thick. So I just wanted to have that be a little bit more sturdy and stability behind that image. Then I'm going to set that off on the side and work on my background. And I thought a snowflake background would be really pretty for this. So I'm going to first start by ink blending a piece of Hammermill cardstock with marine ink. I have a flat blending brush that I'm going to pick up some of that marine ink and start at the very top and start working my way down. It is a very light blue that I'm going to have fade off into white towards the bottom of the card. In all honesty, I had thought about die cutting some snowy hills to add for the background and then maybe color in my water, but what I'm going to do here actually works out a little bit better. Now I'm going to come in with Cadette ink. So these are all inks from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to start at the top again, and I'm going to just blend that down but not go all the way. I want to have it kind of highlight the center area. So I'm more going around the edges than I am the center, because that way where the lightest area is, it's going to kind of draw your attention into the center, which is going to be my sentiment and the image. To stencil on my background, I brought in a Waffle Flower grip mat. This is the 8.5 by 8.5. I placed my cardstock down on top of that, and then I'm bringing in the Scattered Snowflakes stencil. So this one has a lot of delicate images on it. There's a lot going on with this stencil, and the grip mat is really going to help hold down those edges. I just made sure to kind of pull my stencil tight to have it hold in place as much as possible. Once I have that stuck down to that grip mat, I'm going to bring in the Cadette ink. So this was the darker of the two inks that I've used so far, and I'm going to use a regular blending brush for this. The flat blending brush, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get as light of a touch. So with this particular blending brush, I'm going in very, very gently. I didn't want to overpower my background with the snowflakes. I wanted it to be more of a watermark look for the background. So I'm just very gently adding that color over my ink blended panel. Then I'm just going to carefully peel up my stencil. I'll set that off on the side to clean a little bit later. And this is very subtle, just like I was going for, but I decided I wanted to add just a little bit more to this. So I'm going to remove this from my sticky mat using a palette knife that'll help pull that up off of the surface. And now I am going to go back over those edges of my background to kind of help intensify that a little bit. So again, this is Cadette ink going around the very outer edges, but knowing me, I wanted to step that up just a little bit more. So I'm bringing in Royal ink. And this one is, I wasn't quite sure how that color was going to look, so I just squished it down onto my work surface. Thought that was a great blue, it was going to match. So I picked up some of that ink from my glass work surface and also the ink pad. And then I went around those edges once again, but I don't want to go in too far with that ink. Now, it's also very hard for me to make a card and not add splatters, so I'm going to bring in my splat box here. I added a couple drops of water to that dark ink that I have on my work surface. Mix that together with a paintbrush, and then I'm going to add flicks of that to my background, which look really great, especially towards the center because it's so dark compared to my light area there. I'm also going to bring in a white acrylic ink that I place on my work surface, add a couple drops of water to help make that a little bit more fluid, and then add flicks of that white paint to the background as well. I want to be able to stamp directly on this background, so I'm going to dry that with my heat tool, and then I'll bring it over to my Misti, and I'm lining up my image and these sentiments that I want to use. These two sentiments come off of that Wintertime Critters set, and I have a little bit more wordy sentiment that's going to go underneath the Merry Christmas. That would also be really great to put inside of your card, but I don't often do that on the front, so I thought this was kind of a nice change up. It also helped fill in my sky a little bit. So I stamped the Merry Christmas in a Versafine ink. Make sure that my cardstock is tucked down in that bottom left-hand corner. I like to bring in my image as a guide so I know how much room I have, and then I can stamp that larger sentiment, or the one that has more words to it. I stamped that in Versafine ink as well. I'm going to create a card base for this, so I have my Altenews scoring board and a piece of heavyweight cardstock that is cut to 5.5 by 8.5. I scored that at 4 1/4 to create a side folding card base and just reinforce that fold with my bone folder. Then I'm going to take a tape runner, add that to the very outer edges of my card base, and I'll take my front panel, and I always kind of start down in the bottom left-hand corner, and I make sure that that is lined up with the edge, and then I'm going to carefully press down. My Versafine ink is still wet, so I don't want to push my hand over that and risk smearing it. For the image, I'm going to add some thin foam squares to it so it's popped up just a little bit. I'll remove the backing of those foam squares and place that right underneath my sentiments. I have a couple finishing touches that I want to add to the front of the card. First, I have some clear quartz sequins from Gina K Designs that I'm adding with my pick and stick tool and the Connect glue in a fine tip bottle. And then I'm taking Stardust stickles and just kind of coloring in on that ice piece that they're floating on to add a little bit of sparkle. Now, I'm really happy with how this all turned out, and I hope these tips in coloring white images have helped you out. Plus, this turned into a really great card to mail because I don't have a lot of bulk to it. I will have all of my supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog. Thanks for watching today, and I'll see you again real soon.